The alarm on Ethan Cole's phone never needed to go off twice. He was already awake by 5:15, lying on his back in the dark of the bedroom that had once belonged to someone else, staring at the water stain on the ceiling he kept meaning to patch. The apartment was small, 2 rooms carved from the corner of a building that smelled, in winter, of the bakery 1 floor below. It wasn't unpleasant. On cold mornings, the smell of bread drifted up through the radiator grates and filled the place with something like warmth, even when the warmth itself was unreliable. He pulled on jeans, a thermal undershirt, and the green canvas jacket he wore for deliveries. He tied his boots quietly, out of habit. Even though the floorboards in the hallway creaked, no matter what he did, Lily was still asleep. He could hear her breathing from behind the door. He always left cracked a sound so steady, so completely trusting, that it could stop him in his tracks on the worst mornings. It stopped him now. He stood in the hallway for a moment, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe, and let the sound of her settle around him like something solid. She was 7 years old. She had her mother's coloring, dark lashes, pale skin, but she had his eyes, gray-green, too serious for her age. She slept with one arm, thrown over her pillow, and a stuffed rabbit named Captain tucked under her chin. Captain was missing an ear. Lily had requested a surgery kit for Christmas last year, so she could sew it back on herself. He had bought her one. Ethan made coffee in the kitchen with the bare efficiency of someone who has reduced mourning to its minimum parts. Coffee. Granola bar from the third shelf. Lily's lunch, half a turkey sandwich, apple slices, 3 animal crackers packed in the blue box, with her name written on the lid in black marker. He left it on the counter where she'd see it. He was out the door by 5:40. The city at that hour was something he had come to know, the way sailors once knew stars by what was reliable and what was not. The light on the corner of Marsh and Fielding that sometimes stayed green for 11 seconds longer than it should. The spot on Route 9 where ice pooled on the shoulder in the shadow of the overpass. The diner on Callaway that left its side entrance unlocked until 6, which mattered when you needed to use the bathroom during a 5-hour delivery loop. His main work was courier deliveries, a patchwork of contracts across 3 different apps that he juggled by route and time window. It wasn't glamorous. It was also, he had decided, honest, and honesty had come to matter to him in ways it hadn't always. He knew which neighborhoods tipped and which didn't. He knew that people who lived in large houses were, statistically, worse about leaving instructions than people who lived in apartments. He knew how to park a 12-year-old Subaru in a loading zone for exactly 90 seconds without drawing attention. The second job, the one he didn't talk about much, was repair work out of his apartment. Small appliances, mostly. Toasters, lamps, the occasional sewing machine. A neighbor had found out about it 2 years ago after Ethan fixed her daughter's broken record player without being asked and without charging her anything. Word had spread the way it does in buildings where the walls are thin and people watch. Now he had a small roster of regulars, nothing fancy, operating out of a folding table he kept in the corner of the bedroom. He didn't mind the work. He was good with his hands in the focused, patient way that suggests some deeper relationship with how things are made. He liked the moment when something broken became whole again. There was a satisfaction in it that had no name, but that he recognized each time. What he didn't talk about, what he didn't think about if he could help it, was the life he'd had before all this. Not because it had been bad. Not exactly. But because the man he'd been then felt like someone he'd read about. Not someone he remembered being. The version of Ethan Cole who had worn tailored shirts and moved through offices with the particular confidence of someone who knows the value of everything that man had made choices. And the last choice he'd made had been the most expensive one. He hadn't regretted it. Not once. But he'd carried it. On the way to his first pickup that morning, he passed the elementary school on Dennison Road, where Lily would start 2nd grade after the holiday break. The courtyard was empty, the swings hanging motionless in the cold. He slowed as he went by, for no reason he could name. He thought about her face when she woke up. The way she always said good morning to Captain before she said it to anyone else. The way she ate her cereal by sorting the colored pieces into piles before she ate them, smallest cluster first. He thought, whatever else is true, this is enough. He pulled back into traffic, and drove north into the cold. The delivery that brought him to the corner of Halsted and Crane that afternoon was a pharmacy order, 2 prescription bags, a heating pad, and a bottle of shampoo destined for a third-floor walk-up 6 blocks north. Nothing unusual. He'd made the same drop twice before. What stopped him was not the delivery. What stopped him was the boy. He was standing on the sidewalk beside a folding table, the kind with metal legs and a surface barely large enough to hold what was on it. The table itself held maybe a dozen items: a chipped coffee mug, a child's watch with a cracked face, 3 paperback books swollen with old moisture, a pair of men's dress shoes with worn-down heels, and a Ziploc bag containing what appeared to be loose change. The boy was perhaps 9 or 10, small for his age, or maybe just thin in the way children get when the cold has been going on for too long. He wore a navy parka, 1 size too large, the sleeves pushed up at the wrists, and a wool hat pulled down over his ears. He stood with his arms crossed over his chest. Not to look formidable, he didn't look formidable at all, but in the way of someone who is cold, and has been cold for a while, and has accepted it as a condition of being outside. He had a cardboard sign, handwritten in green marker: "Everything must go. Good prices." Ethan slowed. He would have kept walking. He was behind on the route, and the pharmacy bags were temperature sensitive. He would have kept walking, except that the low afternoon light hit the folding table at exactly the angle that made the item in the center of it flash. He stopped. His eyes moved to it without his permission. A ring. It sat in the center of the table on a piece of dark cloth, deliberate placement, as though someone had understood that it deserved to be displayed. It was a large stone, oval cut, the kind they called a Golconda colorless, in the sense that colorless diamonds aren't actually colorless at all, but rather catch light the way water catches light, from everywhere at once. The setting was platinum, low profile, a specific design with 3 small baguettes on each shoulder that he recognized because he had spent 6 weeks choosing it. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at it. His heartbeat did something strange, not accelerated, it slowed, the way a car slows before a collision, as though the body knows before the mind does. "Is that for sale?" His voice came out quieter than he intended. The boy looked up at him. The boy's eyes were dark, careful. The eyes of a child who has learned to read adult faces quickly. "Yeah," the boy said. $50. Ethan did not say anything for a moment. 7 years ago, he had purchased that ring for $1.2 million. He looked at it sitting on a piece of dark cloth on a folding table on a sidewalk in December. $50, he repeated. "It's nice though," the boy said, with a small, entirely sincere defensiveness. "It's real. My mom said it was." Ethan crouched down to the table's level, which put him at the boy's eye line. Up close, the boy's face was more tired than it had looked from the street. There were shadows under his eyes that didn't belong there. "Can I look at it?" The boy hesitated for just a moment. The hesitation of someone performing a calculation, then nodded. Ethan picked it up carefully. The weight of it was familiar. Everything about it was familiar. In the way that objects we have touched with care carry a kind of memory in their substance. He turned it in his fingers. On the inside of the band, in very small engraved letters, EAC, his initials, Ethan Andrew Cole. He set the ring back on the cloth very gently, as though it was something breakable. He looked at the boy. "What's your name?" he asked. 7 years ago, Ethan Cole had been 31 years old and working as a senior associate at a private equity firm in the city's financial district. The firm was called Hargrove Capital. It occupied 4 floors of a glass building that caught the sunrise every morning and threw it back doubled. He had a desk near the window on the 22nd floor. He had a salary that would have seemed like a joke to the person he would later become. He had a ring. The ring had been for a woman named Caroline. He had not given it to her yet. He had been carrying it in the inner pocket of his suit jacket for 3 weeks, looking for the right moment, because he believed in right moments, believed in them with the slightly embarrassed conviction of a man who considers himself practical but is secretly, stubbornly, a romantic. He had not found the right moment. And then one Tuesday in February, he had been late leaving the office. and had taken the longer route home to avoid the subway construction, the route that went past Westbrook General Hospital, and he had seen a woman sitting on the hospital steps in the cold, without a coat, crying in the quiet way that is more terrible than crying loudly. He had almost kept walking. He told himself this later, when he tried to understand his own decision. He had almost kept walking because he was tired, because he was late, because the city at 9 in the evening in February was full of reasons not to stop. He stopped. Her name was Nora Whitfield. She was 28. She had a son, she told him 11 months old, at home with a neighbor. She was at the hospital because she'd been told that day that her kidneys were failing in the way that required surgery within the week if she was going to survive it, and the surgery required a specialist who didn't take her insurance, and the specialist's office had told her very politely and completely, without apology, that the procedure cost $87,000 up front, and that there was no payment plan, and that she had 3 days to decide before the slot was given to someone else. She was sitting on the steps because she had walked out of the office and just sat down. She couldn't remember deciding to. She was sitting there in the February cold without a coat because she'd left it inside when she walked out and hadn't noticed. Ethan sat down next to her. He asked about the son. He asked about the surgery. He asked, with the careful precision of someone who has spent a decade in finance, exactly what number she needed and exactly by when. Then he said, "Let me see what I can do." He had savings. Not enough. He had investments, illiquid ones. Nothing he could access in 3 days. He had the ring in his pocket. He called 3 people that night. The first was a jeweler he knew through a client. The second was a private lender he had worked with twice before. The third was his own accountant. By the following morning, the ring was sold. The proceeds, combined with a short-term loan against his investment accounts, covered the surgeon's fee with $11,000 to spare. He transferred the money to a medical trust for Nora Whitfield at 8:47 in the morning, and then went into the office and did his job for the rest of the day without telling anyone. He didn't leave a name. He told the hospital's financial coordinator it was an anonymous gift. He asked that his identity not be disclosed. The coordinator, who had seen both the worst and the unexpected best of people in her career, simply said, "Okay." Ethan had never gone back. He told himself it was because he didn't want anything in return. Which was true. He told himself it was because what he'd done was simple and required no recognition. Which was also true. The part he didn't tell himself, the part he understood only later, after Lily was born and her mother left, and he was left with a child, and a life he needed to rebuild from its base, was that he had also been afraid. Not of Nora specifically. Of what it would mean to stay connected to something that had cost him that much. Of what it would reveal about who he actually was, underneath the 22nd floor window and the tailored shirt. He had walked away. He had kept walking for 7 years. Until now, crouched on a sidewalk in December, turning a ring in his fingers that still had his initials inside it. Looking at a tired boy in an oversized parka who was trying to sell it for $50. "Marcus," the boy said. "Marcus." Ethan sat back on his heels. "How old are you?" "8. Then quickly, "Almost 9. You're out here by yourself?" "My friend Danny was here before. He had to go home for dinner." Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other. "I'm fine. I don't need help." He said it with the particular dignity of a child who has heard a great many adults ask if he needs help. "I know you're fine," Ethan said. "I just want to talk for a second, if that's okay." Marcus looked at him steadily, then gave a small nod that managed to convey both permission and suspicion. "The ring," Ethan said. "Why are you selling it?" Something moved across the boy's face, a conflict between keeping a secret and the weight of carrying it alone. "My mom needs the money," he said finally. "She's sick." Ethan nodded slowly. "What kind of sick?" "Her kidney." Marcus said it the way children say medical words, carefully, as though they've been handling the pronunciation. "She has to stay in the hospital, but the insurance ran out, so we have to pay for some of it now. And she needs some medicines too." He paused. "I've been selling stuff." He gestured at the table. The chipped mug. The cracked watch. The swollen paperback books. Ethan looked at the table for a long moment. How long has she been in the hospital? 11 days. Where do you go at night? Mrs. Delaney next door. She's nice. She lets me keep my stuff there. Marcus looked at him, then looked away. She makes really good grilled cheese. Ethan was quiet. The ring, he said carefully. Does your mom know you brought it out today? Marcus's jaw tightened. Just slightly. It was her idea. She said it would help. She said we needed the money more than he stopped. She said we needed the money. What did she say before the more than? Marcus looked at him for a moment. More than we needed to keep something just because it felt important. The words landed with a weight that Marcus clearly didn't understand, and Ethan understood completely. He sat with that for a moment. He thought about a woman sitting on hospital steps in February without a coat. He thought about the ring in the inner pocket of a suit jacket for 3 weeks. He thought about a phone call to a jeweler at night, and a number transferred to a medical trust, and walking away. What's your mom's name? Ethan asked. Nora, Marcus said. Nora Whitfield. The world went quiet. Not metaphorically quiet, actually quiet. The way sounds sometimes recede in a moment of shock, as though the body draws all available resources inward and sound becomes a luxury it can't afford. Ethan heard wind. A car horn, far away. His own breathing. Nora Whitfield, he repeated. Yeah. Marcus frowned slightly at whatever expression Ethan was wearing. Do you know her? Ethan looked at the ring on the cloth. At the boy's careful eyes. At the table, with its collection of things sold, to cover the cost of a life. No, he said, which was true. In almost every sense that mattered. They had spoken for 40 minutes on hospital steps in the cold. 7 years ago. He didn't know her. He knew what she needed in that moment, and he had done something about it, and then he had walked away from knowing anything more. I'll take the ring, Ethan said. Marcus straightened. It's $50. I know. Ethan reached into his jacket. He had $42 in cash from that morning's fuel run, and another $40 from the previous day's delivery payout he hadn't yet deposited. He gave Marcus all of it. That's more than $50, Marcus said. I know, it's December. Keep the rest. Marcus looked at the money in his hands. He was trying to be composed about it, trying to perform the competent self-sufficiency he'd been performing all afternoon. But his hands were shaking slightly, and Ethan could see it. Thank you, Marcus said quietly. He said it without performance. It was the most sincere 2-word sentence Ethan had heard in a long time. Ethan pocketed the ring. Then he stayed where he was, crouched at the boy's level. Marcus, he said. Which hospital? He drove Marcus home first to Mrs. Delaney's apartment on the 4th floor of a building on Clement Street. Mrs. Delaney was 67, smelled of lavender and coffee, and greeted Marcus with the quiet, practical affection of a woman who has been good to people her whole life without making a fuss about it. She looked at Ethan with the measured gaze of someone deciding whether to trust him. He's okay, Marcus said. And apparently that was sufficient, because Mrs. Delaney nodded once and offered Ethan a cup of tea he declined politely. He called Lily's school from the car. Her after-school program ran until 6 on Tuesdays. She was fine. He had 2 hours. He sat in the parking lot of Westbrook General for 14 minutes before he went inside. He had not been inside a hospital of consequence since the night his mother died, 12 years ago. That was a different hospital in a different city. But the smell was the same, that specific antiseptic layering over something floral, over something underneath that both of those were trying to cover. He knew the smell. It pressed on him as he walked through the automatic doors. He went to the information desk and asked for Nora Whitfield's room. The woman at the desk typed something, looked at her screen. Are you family? No, he said. I'm a friend. She told him the room number. Floor 3, East Wing. He took the stairs. Partly because he needed the time. Partly because he needed his legs to be doing something. What he was going to say, he didn't know. He had not prepared anything because preparation would have required him to decide what this was. A coincidence, a reckoning, a circle completing itself, and he was not yet ready to decide. He had a ring in his jacket pocket with his own initials inside it. and a boy's voice saying her kidney in the careful way of someone who has practiced medical vocabulary to be ready to say it when they need to. He thought about what Marcus had said. She said we needed the money more than we needed to keep something just because it felt important. That was a woman who had kept a ring for 7 years and called it important. He pushed through the stairwell door into the east wing. Room 317. The door was half open. He stood outside it. He thought, for one clear moment, about walking away. About leaving the ring at the nurse's station with a note. About driving back to Lily and the apartment and the folding table in the corner and the ordinary weight of days. He thought about what 7 years of walking away had actually cost him. He knocked on the open door. She was thinner than he would have expected. Though he hadn't known what to expect, her hair was darker than he remembered. Or maybe it was the light, the fluorescent overhead of the hospital room that flattened everything to its barest elements. She was sitting up in the bed with a paperback face down on her lap, and she was looking at the window when he knocked, and she turned to look at him. Her face went through several things very quickly. First, the polite, slightly guarded expression of someone expecting a hospital volunteer or a nurse she hadn't met yet, or a wrong room. Then, a small furrow of confusion, recognition assembling itself from pieces she hadn't expected to encounter. Then, stillness. The specific stillness that is not the absence of emotion but the presence of too much of it at once. "Hi," Ethan said. Because he had to say something. Nora Whitfield looked at him for a long moment without speaking. She was 35, which he knew without thinking about it. She had dark eyes that were looking at him with a quality he couldn't immediately name. And then he could. It was the look of someone who has thought about a moment so many times that seeing it arrive in reality produces a kind of dislocation. "How did you find me?" she asked. Marcus was selling the ring on Halstead and Crane. Something moved through her face. Grief and tenderness, and the particular exhaustion of someone who has done the right hard thing and not been given any relief for it. "He wasn't supposed to go that far," she said, softly. "He's resourceful. He's 8. Her voice was tired, but there was a warmth in it when she talked about him, even just the pronoun. "He's 8. And he thinks he's 40. Ethan moved slightly into the room, not far. He stood near the door. The room was small. A window, a bed, a chair, a table with a cup of water, and 2 prescription bottles and a phone charger. The ordinary components of a life reduced to what it needs. "I bought the ring from him," Ethan said. He reached into his pocket and set it on the table beside the cup of water. "I wanted to bring it back." Nora looked at the ring on the table. She didn't touch it. "Why?" The question was not accusatory. It was genuine. She was asking the same question he had been asking himself in the parking lot for 14 minutes. "Because it's yours," he said. "It's not mine," she said. "It was never mine. I just—" She stopped. Started again. "I kept it because I couldn't find you. I thought if I kept it, I could find you eventually and give it back. I thought." She shook her head. "I'm not sure what I thought." Ethan sat down in the chair near the bed, without asking, because standing felt wrong. "How did you know it was me?" he asked. "I had it appraised." She looked at the ring. "The jeweler told me what it was worth. And I thought nobody does that. Nobody does that, and just disappears. So I had someone look at it more carefully. The engraving." She looked at him. "E. A. C. You knew my initials. I knew your first name. You told me." She said it simply. "I spent 2 years looking for an Ethan who had worked in finance and might have had those initials. I never found you, and eventually She paused. "Eventually I stopped looking and just kept it, like an obligation I couldn't discharge." The word obligation landed in the room between them. "I didn't want you to feel obligated," he said. "I know that," she said. "That's why I looked for you. So I could tell you thank you and give you the money back and stop feeling." She stopped. "Stop feeling like my life was something someone gave me, like it wasn't really mine." He sat with that for a moment. "You've had a whole life," he said. 7 years. "Yes." She looked at him. "And now, I'm here." Silence. Then, quietly, he said, "I'll help with the surgery costs. And whatever the medication is. I want to." She looked at him steadily. "Why?" "Because I can. And because Marcus came out in the cold to sell things on a folding table." Something shifted in her face. Not quite a smile. Something before a smile. "He carried that table down 4 flights of stairs by himself," she said. "He told me later." 4 flights. "I believe it," Ethan said. The monitor beside her bed made a small, steady sound. The light through the window was going gray. He thought about Lily's pickup at 6. He thought about the ring on the table and the boy on the sidewalk and the woman 7 years ago sitting on hospital steps without a coat, and the version of himself that had sat down next to her, and the version that had then walked away, and the version that was sitting here now. "I'm sorry I disappeared," he said. She shook her head. But it wasn't a dismissal. It was more like she was shaking off the accumulation of 7 years of something she had been carrying. "You gave me my life," she said. "That's what you did. Whatever came after, that's what you actually did." He didn't say anything. Sometimes words land with enough weight that the right response is to let them. He did not do anything dramatic. He was not that kind of person, and he understood by now that the moments which actually change things rarely look like the moments that are supposed to change things. They look like phone calls and paperwork. They look like sitting in a hospital administrator's office on a Tuesday evening, going through numbers. They look like your hands being steady when you sign something. He spoke to the billing department for 40 minutes. He understood the structure of hospital debt in a way most people don't, because he had spent a decade learning how money moves through institutions, and that knowledge had not gone anywhere when he'd left the industry. He negotiated. He identified a charitable fund the hospital maintained for cases like Nora's, that the billing representative had not mentioned. The fund required an application, which he helped complete, which reduced the outstanding balance by 30% before he spent $1 of his own money. He spent the rest. Not dramatically, methodically. When he was done, he went back up to the 3rd floor. Marcus was there. He had arrived sometime in the previous hour, apparently having convinced Mrs. Delaney to drive him over. He was sitting in the chair beside his mother's bed, eating a granola bar, and explaining something about his school's science fair with a focused intensity that Ethan found, from the doorway, almost unbearably endearing. Nora saw Ethan first and gave him a look steady, quiet. Something in it that wasn't quite gratitude and wasn't quite recognition, but was somewhere between the two. Marcus turned. "Oh," Marcus said, "it's the ring guy." "The ring guy," Ethan agreed. "Did you give it back?" "Yeah." Marcus looked at the ring on the table beside his mother. His expression was complicated in the way children's expressions are when they're managing something they haven't fully processed. "Mom cried," he told Ethan, as a factual report. "I know," Ethan said. "She says she's fine. But she cried." "That's allowed," Ethan said. "Crying is allowed." Marcus considered this with the evaluative seriousness he seemed to bring to most things. "I know that," he said. "I'm not saying she was wrong. I'm just reporting." "Good reporting," Ethan said. Marcus looked at him for a moment longer. "Did you really know my mom before?" The room went a little quieter. Nora looked at her hands. Ethan looked at Marcus. "A long time ago," Ethan said. "For a short time." In an important way, Marcus processed this. How important? The most important. Marcus looked at his mother, then back at Ethan, with the rapid, accurate assessment of a child who understands more than adults give him credit for. He didn't ask anything else. He went back to his granola bar. He didn't leave until 8. Lily was with the neighbor, who had let herself in with the spare key, and put on a movie, and told Lily her dad was stuck at work. Lily had apparently accepted this with the particular equanimity of a child, who has learned that her father does what he says and comes home when he says he will. She was asleep by the time he arrived. He sat on the edge of her bed for a few minutes in the dark, listening to her breathe, with Captain tucked under her chin and one arm thrown over the pillow. He thought about Marcus sitting in the same chair he himself had occupied, reporting factually on his mother's tears. He thought about Nora looking at the ring on the table. He thought about his own initials inside it, EA. C pressed there 7 years ago, with a precision he'd believed would last forever, attached to a promise he'd believed he would keep. The promise had not been to Caroline, as it turned out. He understood that now, with the clarity that sometimes only comes from the outside edge of things. The ring had never been for Caroline. It had been for the idea of a life that was going somewhere specific and beautiful and planned. And when he'd given it away, he had given away the plan along with it, and discovered, without planning to, that living without the plan had made him, quietly, more himself. He was still sitting there when Lily stirred. "Daddy." "Hey, Bug, go back to sleep." "Where were you?" "Helping someone." She was quiet for a moment, hovering at the edge of consciousness. "Is the person okay?" "Getting there," he said. "Okay," she said. She shifted, pulling Captain closer. "Good." He stayed until her breathing slowed back into sleep. Then he sat in the kitchen with the light off and the smell of the bakery drifting up through the floor. And he thought about nothing in particular, which is sometimes the closest a person can get to thinking about everything. He went back the next day, not because he had planned to, or not entirely. He went because Marcus called him. Marcus had gotten his number from the hospital billing department, who had left Ethan's contact information on file, and Marcus had called with the directness of a child who sees no reason to circle around a thing. "Are you coming today?" Marcus asked. Ethan was in the parking lot of a pharmacy on his delivery route. "I was planning to stop by, yeah." "Good." A pause. "Mom made me call to say thank you again. But I also just wanted to know. I'll be there around 5. "Okay." Another pause. "Can you bring a granola bar?" "They only have the bad kind here." Ethan looked at the pharmacy behind him. "What kind do you like?" "Peanut butter. Not honey. Honey ones are lying about being good." "Noted," Ethan said. He brought 4. He went back the day after that, and the day after that. It did not feel like a decision, exactly. It felt more like the continuation of something that had been interrupted 7 years ago, a conversation that had been suspended mid-sentence, and was now, in some way neither of them had planned, resuming. Nora's surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. It was a shorter procedure than the one 7 years ago had been. Different problem, different intervention, different prognosis, but she was afraid of it, as most people are afraid of going under, and she didn't say so directly, but he could see it in the way she held herself on the days before. On Sunday evening, he brought Lily. He hadn't planned that, either. She had been with him on his last delivery, and they had ended up near the hospital. And she had said, with the unanswerable directness children have, "Can I meet the person you've been helping?" He had said yes before he'd fully considered the question. Lily walked into room 317 with Captain tucked under one arm and introduced herself to Nora with a seriousness that made Nora blink and then smile, the first full smile Ethan had seen from her. "That's a very distinguished rabbit," Nora said. "He's been through a lot," Lily said. "His ear came off, but I sewed it back. I can tell. It's good stitching." Lily looked at her with the evaluative brightness she reserved for people she was deciding about. "Are you scared about tomorrow?" Nora looked at her, then glanced at Ethan, then back at Lily. "A little," she said. "Yes, I was scared when I got my tonsils out," Lily said. "But Dad told me the doctor practices a lot before they do it on a real person." "Like, a lot." "A lot. That's true," Nora said. "And also he held my hand until I fell asleep." Lily looked at Ethan. "He can probably do that for you too." The room was very quiet. Ethan looked at Lily, who appeared entirely unaware that she had just said something extraordinary. Nora looked at the window. Marcus, who had been sitting on the floor eating the last peanut butter granola bar, looked up at this, then looked at Ethan with the rapid and accurate assessment that had become familiar. He went back to his granola bar. The surgery took 4 hours and 11 minutes. Ethan knew the time because he sat in the waiting room with Marcus for all of it. They played 20 questions, which Marcus won 3 times out of 4, because Marcus chose very specific subcategories that Ethan hadn't known were categories. They ate vending machine crackers. They watched a nature documentary on the mounted television for a while without speaking, which turned out to be comfortable. Marcus fell asleep against Ethan's arm in the third hour. He didn't wake up when Ethan very carefully adjusted position so Marcus wouldn't fall. He thought about this small, specific weight against his arm. He thought, the world turns on things like this, on small specific weights that you didn't know you were holding until you are. When the surgeon came out to tell them the procedure had gone well, Marcus woke up instantly, like a switch had been flipped, and asked 2 questions in rapid succession. Is she okay? And, when can I see her? Both answers were satisfactory. In the weeks that followed, things changed and didn't change in the proportions that life usually offers. Nora came home to her apartment, not far from Clement Street, as it turned out. Marcus went back to school. Lily and Marcus met twice more, once at the school playground and once at the bakery downstairs from Ethan's apartment, where the owner let Lily sit on the counter and Marcus was given a croissant because Marcus had asked for one with a directness the baker found, apparently, refreshing. Ethan and Nora talked. Carefully at first, then less carefully. There were things between them that weren't simple. 7 years. The particular imbalance of what he had done for her. The difficulty of beginning something without knowing what it was beginning. But there were also, surprisingly, easy things. The way they moved through silences without discomfort. The way she asked about his repair work with genuine curiosity rather than polite tolerance. The way she understood, without being told, why he had walked away not as an excuse for it, but as an explanation that she could hold without using it against him. He gave her the ring back, not as a gesture, not as a statement. He simply gave it back because it was hers, had been hers for 7 years in every way that mattered, and because the initials inside it had never meant what he'd thought they meant. What do you want me to do with it? She asked. Keep it, he said, or sell it. Or give it to Marcus when he's older, and let him sell it if he needs to. It's yours. She looked at it in her palm for a long moment. It's strange, she said. Keeping something this long. For a reason. And then, the reason walks through the door. What was the reason? She looked up at him. Finding you, she said simply. Returning it. Finishing the thing. He thought about 7 years. About the plan he'd given away. About the apartment and the bakery smell, and Lily's steady breathing, and the folding table in the corner of the bedroom. About a boy on a sidewalk in the cold with a cardboard sign that said everything must go. Is it finished? He asked. She considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. No, she said. I think it's just beginning. The bakery downstairs did a special on December mornings, small boxes of cinnamon pastries, enough for a family of 4. For $6. Ethan had been buying one every Saturday since he'd discovered it. This Saturday, he bought 2. Lily was sitting at the kitchen table doing a puzzle with Marcus, a complicated one, 500 pieces, a photograph of the night sky. Marcus was approaching it systematically by sorting pieces into edge and non-edge, and Lily was approaching it by looking for pieces that were the color she liked best, which was a different methodology but seemed to be working. Nora was on the couch with her feet tucked under her and a mug of coffee and a book, which she wasn't reading. She was watching the 2 children at the table. When Ethan came in and set the box of pastries down, she looked up at him. They've been at it for 40 minutes, she said. Marcus is getting very intense about the methodology. I can hear that, Ethan said, from the table, without looking up. I'm not intense. I'm efficient. Those are different things, Lily agreed sagely. Ethan sat down next to Nora. Outside, the December light was the specific gray-white of early morning before the sun breaks through. The kind of light that promises something without delivering it yet. The ring was on the shelf above the window, between a small wooden clock and a photograph of Marcus's first birthday. Nora had put it there herself, the week after she'd come home from the hospital. She'd said it belonged somewhere it could be seen. Not worn, seen. He thought about what it had been for. The plan, the promise, the idea of a life going somewhere specific. He thought about how he'd given it away to give a stranger her life back. And how the stranger had kept it for 7 years like an obligation, and how a boy had carried it down 4 flights of stairs and sold it on a sidewalk, and how he had found it again by accident, or by something he didn't have a name for, and how all of it had led to this kitchen, this light, this sound of children arguing constructively about puzzle methodology. He looked at Nora. She looked back at him, with the expression she had that was between things, between what had happened and what was happening, between the long years of something unfinished and the present moment, which was complete. "Hey," she said. "Hey," he said. From the table, a small, victorious sound. Marcus had found a corner piece. Lily immediately requested it for a location she'd identified on the other side of the puzzle, and the subsequent negotiation was loud and principled, and entirely characteristic of both of them. The light through the window shifted. The clouds moved. For a moment, the kitchen was full of a pale, clean winter sun that caught everything: the puzzle pieces on the table, the coffee in the mug, the ring on the shelf, the two faces across from each other on the couch, and made it all, briefly, shine. The ring sat above the window where it had always been, not a promise of something to come, evidence of something already true.